I tried really hard to fix my sleep. So I worked with a psychologist who specialized in insomnia for about a year, did nothing. Obviously, continued to be on sleeping pills at higher doses, didn't really do much. Bought the weighted blankets, tried every internet hack, and just nothing was working. And my mental health was really starting to suffer. And I was depressed for the first time. And my thoughts were really starting to scare me. My son was only 3.5 at that time, but I couldn't see myself continuing in that way. And I wasn't sure that I would make it to his 18th birthday if things didn't change. And finally landed on Daniel's website. And I landed on, YouTube. I know the answers here for this person, but again, I'm not really sure what I'm looking for. So browsing through the different, videos, and I don't recall which one, but one of the earlier ones. And I'm watching, and he says, in our school and our how we define insomnia, is it's self-perpetuating trouble sleeping from the fear of wakefulness. And it was kind of like, what did he say? You know, Rewind. And I probably watched
Yeah.
it 3 to 5 times. And my mind was quite literally blown. It was a light bulb moment for me because I knew instantly that that was the piece of information that I had been waiting for. Nobody has spoken about insomnia before. And it just instinctively made sense.
Hi, community. Welcome to another very special episode of Talking Insomnia. I'm Coach Allie, and today we have with us actually one of our coaches, Coach Lori, and she is going to be sharing her recovery story with us. We're so happy that you've decided to share your journey with us and for being here today. Thank you so much for doing this, Lori.
Thank you, Allie. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. So, without further ado, let's just jump right in and you can just kind of tell us your story. When did insomnia begin for you? And just walk us through it.
Sure. So my insomnia started after my son was born in January 2018. So, of course, I had a lot of sleep disruption, being a new mom. And it's really difficult for me to pinpoint exactly when, sleep disruption turned into insomnia. But at some point, my brain definitely registered that something weird was going on. So as he got older, his sleep was getting better, mine was deteriorating. And before he was 1, I was already on sleeping pills. So uh, things kind of got worse pretty quickly when I went back to work. He was 14 months. And suddenly sleep went from sort of optional, nice to have, to like life or death, or, employed, not employed. So for the next 2.5 years until about mid 2021, I tried really hard to fix my sleep. So I worked with a psychologist who specialized in insomnia for about a year, did nothing. Obviously, continued to be on sleeping pills at higher doses, didn't really do much. Bought the weighted blankets, tried every internet hack, and just nothing was working. Obviously, I continued to be more and more hyper aroused, felt just permanently fried, was not ever sleepy. And at my lowest point, I would say I probably slept about every fourth night. So I was pulling regular all nighters, many in a row, and would just kind of crash. So by mid 2021, it had been for sure like 2.5 years of insomnia plus new mom sleep deprivation. So I had slept very little, and my mental health was really starting to suffer. And I was depressed for the first time. And my thoughts were really starting to scare me. My son was only 3.5 at that time, but I couldn't see myself continuing in that way. And I wasn't sure that I would make it to his 18th birthday if things didn't change. So I actually quit my job just because I couldn't cope. I hit burnout. I'd been going and going and going. I quit my job. If anything, I knew I needed to really focus on finding a solution to insomnia. And as much as I'd already tried a lot, I kind of recommitted myself to the process. And I knew at that point, without a doubt, that I was the problem. I knew this wasn't physical. I knew I was the problem. So did my doctor. She didn't know anything about insomnia, but even she knew that, it was a problem between the ears. And
Oh, interesting.
so,
Okay.
we knew that, but again, didn't really know how to fix it. But I went back to psychology today, which was sort of how I found my first psychologist. Even though it hadn't worked the first time, I went back because, again, I knew this was, you know, in that space, and filtered by insomnia and went down the websites one by one. But this time I checked every single website and I finally found what I was looking for. And it was a woman who specialized in CBT-I. Now, for all the
Okay.
years that I had struggled with insomnia, I didn't know about CBT-I.
Really? Okay.
I
Wow.
hadn't found it, which is kind of odd in hindsight, but I hadn't, and my doctor didn't tell me about it. So I found her, got on the phone with her, and the minute she told me that CBTI was the best in class treatment for insomnia, I was done. Here's my credit card, let's do
Yeah.
it.
The gold standard. Mhm.
Gold standard. I was sold. And I worked with her for 2 months and I told myself, if you follow the rules perfectly, this is it. So it was really hard. Like a lot of people will tell you, it's not easy. I struggled in particular with getting up in the middle of the night. This happened to be Canadian winter. It was dark. It was cold. I lived in a townhouse. So waking up, getting out of bed meant like climbing downstairs, being by myself in my kitchen. It was really, really hard, but I was really motivated and I did it. And after 2 months, it was definitely better. I wasn't, um, my sleep was getting a little bit better. And if anything else, I think, I told myself that I was better. I
Right.
that sense of optimism and really kind of carried me through. So I did that and I had reduced my sleeping pill, but I hadn't gotten rid of it completely. So I was still on a low dose of trazodone by the end of it. And I
Mhm.
told myself, when sleep gets really regular, then I'm going to get off of this. And it never did. So even though it got better, I still never felt confident enough to get rid of my trazodone. And, I clutched to those rules, the CBTI rules, like a life vest. I still followed them, for years after. I didn't read in bed anymore. I only went to bed when I was sleepy. And my fear was still there because I was afraid. My fear sort of shifted. Then I was afraid if I stopped following the rules, then my insomnia would come back. Right. So I was still, fearful. I was still really anxious about sleep and I was still thinking about sleep a lot.
Right.
Um,
Just fear in sheep's clothing now.
yeah. And I was
Still
still
there.
kind of, it's fine. It's fine. The flames are all around me, but like, I'm fine. I wanted to be fine. Um, but this growing sense of like, I don't know that we're actually really fine. So fast forward about a year and a half after my CBTI.
Okay.
So it's almost mid 2023. And like I said, I'm
Okay.
still following CBTI rules, right? Sleep is still very up and down. I'm still on trazodone. And my mom was visiting and we were up late chatting. It was probably midnight or later. And she said, oh, really, it's time to go to bed. And I said, oh, no, I can't go to bed. I'm not sleepy. And this is one of the core CBTI rules. You go to bed when you're sleepy. And she was like, what? Like, it's midnight. You look tired. How come you're? And I just was like, that's my rule. And, this is what I'm doing. This, don't mess with my process. And so I was kind of annoyed, but that was the turning point. And that was when I really had to be honest with myself. And I was like, I'm not fine. Like, I'm not fine. This is not normal. You know, I'm doing all of this, but I'm still not fine. And I just had this feeling that I was missing something, but I didn't know what I was missing. And
Right.
it was a definite low point in my recovery because I did CBT-I. This was the best solution for insomnia. And if
I
I
hear you.
wasn't better, then like where did I go from there? So
Right.
I think that's a large part of why I kind of denied, the truth for so long was because I knew it felt like the end of the road, when CBT-I didn't
Mhm.
work. So I did thankfully have kind of one idea left, one ace in the hole. 6 months before that moment, so late 2022, I'd been sent an article about sleep from a family member because, by then everybody knew I was struggling with sleep. And it was an op ed written by one of Daniel's students. For the first time in all of my years, somebody talked about insomnia the way I felt it. You talk a lot about insomnia and they talk about physical fatigue. They talk about being annoyed with the sleep disruption. They don't talk about obsession. They don't talk about trying everything. They don't talk about, the thoughts and the fears and
Hyper-aroused.
dreading sleep
Mhm.
every night. They don't talk about it like that. And for the first time, a single other person on the entire planet knew what I felt. And I was so relieved. Like if anything, I was like, thankfully, someone else knows. But
Yeah.
I was still stuck in my CBTI story. So even though
Mm.
there was Daniel's name right at the top of the article, Sleep Coach School, I didn't click on it because I thought, I'm fine. I did CBTI. I'm so happy for this person. She found her solution, but I don't need that because I found CBTI.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So back now I'm in 2023, I realize I'm not fine. And I thought, well, I know there's one person on the planet who knows what I went through. What did she do? So finally, this time I'd saved the article, thankfully, dug it up, clicked through, and finally landed on Daniel's website. And I landed on, YouTube. I know the answers here for this person, but again, I'm not really sure what I'm looking for. So browsing through the different, videos, and I don't recall which one, but one of the earlier ones. And I'm watching, and he says, in our school and our how we define insomnia, is it's self-perpetuating trouble sleeping from the fear of wakefulness. And it was kind of like, what did he say? You know, rewind, and I probably watched
Yeah.
it 3 to 5 times, and my mind was quite literally blown. It was a light bulb moment for me because I knew instantly that that was the piece of information that I had been waiting for. Nobody has spoken about insomnia before, and it just instinctively made sense. Like I was beyond a believer, like I knew that that was true. I knew that that was why I was struggling. You know, as much as I knew I had these fears, no one had ever kind of held up the mirror and explained to me that those fears, which were very obvious, were the reason that I kept, having this struggle.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, just that idea alone brought immense relief. So I bought his book, I watched some videos, and that was it. So I looked at the insomnia immunity program, but at that point, it had been years, like 4.5, years of dealing
Yeah.
with my insomnia. And honestly, I was sick of it. I was so tired of insomnia. I'd invested a lot of time, energy, and money that
Yeah.
I just didn't really feel like I needed it. I thought, oh, I know a lot about sleep you know, and I was tired of it. And on the face of it, it kind of like seems pretty simple, right? His
Right.
steps. So I thought, you know what? I can do this myself.
Mhm.
And turns out I was wrong. So, you know, doing what I did, which was really not a whole lot, I did feel a lot better, like I said. with his very simple definition, he gave me, he explained that this condition, that I had was neither a death sentence, which at times I thought it was, nor was it a life sentence, that there was a
Yeah.
way out of it.
Yeah.
And so I felt a lot better. And my sleep was much better, particularly when I was still on my trazodone. But with his help, I got off the trazodone, and then I found, then I didn't have my security blanket anymore. So then, my thoughts were a bit more difficult to manage, sort of without the help of the trazodone. And so, I continued to make kind of these little mistakes that really are so small, but they're the difference between still struggling with your sleep and peaceful sleep. So fortunately, I was able to get the education and the coaching that I needed to fix my sleep when I decided to be a sleep coach. So unbeknownst to me, I really did need it. For the first time in the training, I got all of the information. I didn't know everything by a long shot, so I finally got all of the lessons in the right order, and the coaching, like Daniel sort of accidentally has coached me many times.
Yeah.
Aha moments with him that, were completely unplanned. I've learned a lot from other coaches, as again, a trainee that I needed for myself,
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so finally, I will say that I feel like in many ways my recovery sort of has just started in the last few months when I decided, to do the training program. So I can honestly say now, having made a lot of mistakes and a lot of the same mistakes more than once, but I'm actually sleeping really well, you know,
That's
but,
fantastic.
but I needed it. So I kind of got a 2 for 1. I learned how to be a sleep coach, but I
Yeah.
also, I fixed my
That's
own.
really cool. So I didn't realize that you didn't do the insomnia
Oh,
immunity, that you went straight to the coaching program,
I did.
and that's kind of
Yep.
it propelled your recovery. So
Yep.
you brought up this idea of kind of making some mistakes, which I know our community is going to be like, what mistakes did she make? Like, so I think that it'd be really helpful if you could maybe expand on those a little bit,
Yeah.
and how you went from still struggling to peaceful sleep. And you kind of mentioned that there were some mistakes in there. And so maybe, yeah, if you want to give us a
So
little info
the
about that.
Yeah, the 2 biggest that I've made, the first one is about my thoughts. I didn't realize until pretty late, that I was that was an intangible sleep effort that I still had. And so I was, whenever I would lay down and, go to sleep, I would put like purposely try to think about something nice, whether it was a memory or like, just something nice. And what I didn't realize with this, that's fine on its own, but I was using that as like a defense mechanism, that I was kind of putting this thing there because I was afraid. And sometimes I would even like see it, sometimes I imagine it's like that thought, like that sleep thought. It's like, what if you don't sleep? What if you don't? It's like I can see it, but I'm like, no, 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 I don't want to, I don't want to talk about it. Nope, keep going. And so it took me a minute, and it was during a training call with Daniel and my fellow trainee Natasha, where I realized that I was using that technique to block and avoid those sleep thoughts. So I was
Gotcha.
very afraid of, you know, um, of having those thoughts, and I was avoiding them. And
Mhm.
and now I just learned, you've got to let them say their piece, and that's actually how they go away. But letting them happen, especially at bedtime, which is a very vulnerable time, um, letting that thought kind of pierce through and hearing it was really scary, but it actually works. They,
The idea of letting them be. Yeah.
them be, but I didn't realize, and I always tell other people, and I had to learn it again. If you don't know you're making the mistake, you can't. So it started by just catching myself like, oh, I'm trying to put this nice thought in place, but there's a sleep thought that needs to be heard. So now I just,
Yeah.
and I'm stealing this from Coach Christian, but he said, like I let my thoughts play. So now it's kind of like, they're all over the place. They just kind of bounce around, and then I fall asleep. But that was one. My thoughts were, I think, like a lot of people, they felt like a fact or a prediction, or, they were just very scary. And this is
Mhm.
the first time where I've really learned that thoughts are just thoughts, and
Yeah.
a simple idea, but really powerful. So that one, I made that mistake multiple times. The second big one I made is, and this I took from you, so it's great that we're chatting, but I made the mistake of thinking I had figured it out. And you
Mm.
wrote this once, and I internalized it, but I kind of committed it to memory before I realized I was doing it. But you wrote, every time I thought I figured it out, I was humbled by an all-nighter. And you wrote it, and I thought, that's so lovely. That's a good one. I'm going to use that. And the irony is I made that mistake multiple times. And
Yeah.
it was just, it was like, I just did. I don't know. I just did. And then eventually, maybe by like the fourth time, that I had this thought again of, oh, this is it. This is the recipe. This is the formula. This is finally I caught myself having it. Right. And then I'd be like, ah,
Yes.
Allie's words. You don't know. No, you do not know. We
Yep.
just,
Yep.
what
Oh
do we
yeah,
know?
even still, I'm just like I'm just on the journey, you know?
Yeah. No, I still, but
Yeah.
I made it many times, and then finally I could catch myself having it, and I'd
Yeah.
correct it and
Yep.
be like, "No, we don't know that. What do we know?
Yep.
We come back to what we know. We know we'll be okay. We've been here before
Exactly.
for sure. We've
Yep.
done this a lot. It's not our favorite, but we'll be okay." And
Yes.
so that was another one. Those 2 I made repeatedly. I made those repeatedly,
Yeah.
those
So
mistakes.
how would you say that because I love this concept and we talk about it a lot, I think, in the recovery space, and it's true for me too. And it's what you said about how we come to this, it's really like an embodied knowing that we're going to be okay. And because we've gone through so many experiences of not sleeping and getting through the day, and we have experiential evidence that this is the case, but it takes so much time for that to go from our cognitive understanding logical mind to get clear into that brainstem and that amygdala where
Mhm.
we're doing the rewiring. And so what you said about that, I think it's so true. And how would you explain how that kind of happened for you, that
I
knowing you're okay?
Yeah, I feel like I can't take a lot of credit for it. We talk a lot about being brave, but I think for me, a lot of it was ignorance. And all of those years, the 2.5 years for sure, I just kept pushing myself to kind of go through it. And I wouldn't really recommend that. That's one thing I think I wish I would have had more compassion for myself, and maybe slowed down a little bit because, again, my mid 2021, I was completely fried and burnt out. But in a sense, that ignorance kind of, I think, then paved the way for that knowing I'd be okay because I did it for so long.
Mm,
So
mhm.
and a lot of it was, I did it for, other people, and my son kind of like helped carry me through. But so there's just kind of that, pushing yourself and kind of getting through all of the things, that builds that resilience and builds that muscle of um, knowing that you're going to be okay. And it's exposure therapy, but it was like unplanned, right? Like it was just, you know, I just
Mhm,
kind of
mhm.
did it sort of, like I said, accidentally, not with a lot of bravery necessarily, but I just kind of did it. And then it became a bit less scary. But the other thing I think that helped was, since then I've kind of, looked back on pictures of that time, and I wonder sometimes, like, oh, like, I wonder how I slept that night. Like, I know generally that period of time was extremely difficult, but seeing some of the light moments, the Christmases, birthdays, or just pictures with my son smiling, I'm like, it wasn't all bad either, right? Like,
Mhm.
I was still okay. There were
Yeah,
still lots of moments where, I smiled, I laughed, and I saw things and I did things. And I think that was also a good reminder for me that, like, it wasn't all bad, like it
right.
was, um, there were still those moments. So I think kind of that inadvertent, like I said, I don't want to claim I was very brave, but just kind of blindly pushing through really built those muscles of, like, yes, I can do this. And a lot of that, it might have been different if I didn't have a child, but I think being a parent and a parent of a young child, that really just kind of, you just pushed me through. But then also looking back and going, yeah, there was, I was okay because I still smiled, I still laughed, I still, you know, found joy,
Yeah,
even though it was a very painful time, very painful.
yeah, yeah. Do you have a sense now, like at this stage in recovery, of that sense of being okay being different than it was when you were just kind of powering through? Like,
I think,
is there more of a for me, there's more of a peace, like, within myself, just like, I'm just an okayness, like, yeah, and it's just so interesting because that feels like freedom to me,
yeah, I
knowing that
don't,
no matter what happens, I can handle it and I'll be
yeah,
okay.
yeah, I didn't
And
feel
that
okay then, right? Like, okay,
that's what I'm
yes,
meaning.
sorry.
Yeah,
I felt like I was surviving, and, like, I
exactly.
yeah, it was not, it was, there was probably some, like, a lot of ignorance and, denial, and, we're gonna push through, but that ran out, like I said, by
Sure,
2021,
because you were in
I was
survival mode, right?
yeah, and then I was done. I was like, I cannot. And that's why I quit my job, because I'm like, I just couldn't keep
Right,
doing all the things, right? Like, I was trying to
right.
juggle all of the things. I was trying to be a mom, work full time, parent, take care of the house. And I absolutely could not. And I did not feel
Yeah,
okay. It was more just like
yep,
head in the sand. We're gonna
yep,
kind of keep doing this. Now it's different, right? Like, now, like I said, that experience did help me today realize, like, yes, you can go through a period of sleep disruption, or you can go through an all-nighter, because yes, you've done it. But now, um, and that's why I think I felt immediately better when I found Daniel's work, because again, that emotion fatigue for me, the depression, the, like, exhaustion, and the fear, a lot of that was tied into the what is happening to me. Right.
yeah,
So, and I've always said this to a lot of our students, right? I don't have the formula, but, you know, it's like the physical fatigue is like this part of it, and the emotional fatigue is like, this part of it. It's just,
mhm,
that's really what makes this so hard. So yeah, now my knowing my okayness is, the sturdiness and the resilience that I did build accidentally all of those years,
mhm,
knowing, yes, I
mhm,
certainly could get through a day of no sleep because I've done it, right?
mhm.
Um, but it's peace of mind. Like, um, there was a reason I got into this mess, a perfectly logical reason that has happened to lots of people, you know,
Yeah,
and so there was a diagnosis, and there's a solution to it. And that's why, I at first I didn't understand, that idea of, like, immunity, insomnia immunity. I was kind of like, oh, it sounds cute. But now I'm like, no, I get it, because this will never, it cannot happen to me again. It
mhm.
cannot, right? Like,
'Cause
sleep
you
disruption,
know
absolutely.
yeah, your knowledge. Yeah,
But I know now, I know how it happened, and that again, that relief and that peace of mind, that's what makes me okay. Like, that's how I feel. I'm bulletproof, like, you know,
Mhm.
at this, at this point. So no, I'm definitely not okay, but like surviving. But no,
Right. There's definitely a difference, right, between
oh,
that
absolutely.
intrinsical okayness, which is that
Yes,
piece of not just mind, but it's an embodied piece, right? Yeah,
yes,
and that's I feel like uh, a really amazing thing that happens when we recover. So
yes,
that's so
yeah,
cool. Yeah. Well, okay. This has been so good. I love talking with you. So we always ask a couple of questions at the end of these interviews, and the first one would be if you could go back to that space where you were really struggling, just really having a hard time, and if there was something you could tell yourself then, what would
yeah.
that be?
I think I would, I've said this to you actually, but I think I would have a lot more compassion for myself and for what I was going through. Like, I knew I had an issue, but I kind of also waffled between, this is a problem to like, oh, like this is what mom life is, or, like this is kind of normal. This isn't a big deal, and kind of denying my experience. And if I could go
Mm-hmm.
back, I think I would say, no, this is a big deal. It's not going to get better on its own, which you might think it might, and this is really hard, and, slow down. Because like I said, I kind of like go, 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 and until I just hit a wall. And so I'd
Yeah.
have more compassion for myself. This is really hard. I've said to some folks, like, everyone knew I was struggling with sleep, but nobody knew the depth of the struggle.
Yeah.
And part of it was because I was embarrassed. I was like, who doesn't sleep? Like, it's just so weird. And I think for me, I kept comparing myself to other moms, and I didn't know any other mom who couldn't sleep when she finally could, when she
Yeah.
didn't have a baby to blame anymore. So, I was really embarrassed by it. Like I said, kind of tried to deny the problem or like make light of it, wish it would go away on its own. And yeah, I wish I could go back and just say, like, no, this is serious. You deserve help. You deserve sleep. This is not a mom thing. This is not normal, and
Yeah.
you don't have
Yeah.
to do you don't have to do all the things. And probably the second thing I would tell myself, which isn't at my lowest point, but when I found Daniel's work, I know why I didn't join the program. Like I said, I was exhausted. I was so exhausted. I was so bored of my own insomnia. I was so sick of it. But I'd go back and I'd say, you're going to need to do the work. Like, you're almost there, you know,
Mhm.
but you will need to do the work. Just that little bit of work, those few extra dollars, you know, will make all of the difference. And, I
Yeah.
got there in the end. But I could have been sleeping a whole lot better, a whole lot sooner had I made a different choice.
Yeah.
And, so that's probably the second thing I'd go back and be like, "I know you're pretty tired of it." But like I've said to some of our students, I said, "It's like in the journey of 100 pounds, losing 100 pounds, the last 10 are always the hardest." And that's kind of where I got a bit lazy, you know? And,
Yeah.
so, uh,
It's a good metaphor. Yeah.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, that rewiring doesn't happen by itself. It's a self-directed process.
I know.
A hun-
It is. So,
100%. It
yeah.
really is. I mean, that's why we call it that self-directed neuroplasticity. It's intentional, right? That's so cool. Okay, so tell me this, if there has been any silver linings, anything that how this is like maybe rippled out and affected your life in other ways beyond insomnia, would you have any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. I mean, nobody would wish insomnia on their worst enemy. It's awful.
For
Right?
sure. I say that. I do.
all the time, right? However, I'd be lying if I didn't say I got a lot out of it at the same time. And I don't know if I think someone, probably a fellow coach said this, but it's this idea that you won't come out of it the same way you came in. And
Mhm,
that is definitely true for me. So, when I came into insomnia in this program, like I was a chronic worrier, overthinker, hard on myself, and someone who, didn't think she could, assume she could outwork any problem. And none of
mhm,
these things
mhm.
are like helpful in insomnia. And if anything, that's probably exactly why I landed in insomnia. But, so through this program, like I've learned a lot of like tools and skills that I've not only applied to sleep, but, I just kind of apply them, generally speaking.
Yes, yeah.
Still probably someone who's kind of always gonna run anxious, run a little bit
Mhm,
overthinker, that's just who I am,
mhm,
and, I'm not gonna
mhm,
fault myself for that, but now I know, again, I have these tools. So, I think there's 3 big areas for me, and, the first is a new way to relate to my thoughts and my anxieties and my fears in a
mhm.
way that's productive, you know, especially the ones
So
that are
tell
unc
us about that.
well, I mean, the ones that are uncomfortable, I was also a chronic, like, avoider. Just
Mhm, mhm.
didn't want to, think it, didn't wanna feel it, was just kind of like, "Okay, what else can we what can we do to kinda distract ourselves or avoid it?" Um, didn't even wanna have, like, an uncomfortable conversation, right? Was just trying to didn't wanna feel my feelings.
Mhm,
And then, of course, like, realizing that that's why they stick, So now
right.
I'm just generally speaking, whether it's a sleep thought or another thought, I know. So again, it's one of these things that I know because I've experienced it many times that by letting it happen and letting me feel what I feel, that that's the fastest way for it to kind of, fade away. But that's
Yeah,
very different. I think that's very different, way
yeah.
for me to, like I said, kind of relate to these thoughts and anxieties. Um,
Yeah, that's a
Also,
big change, isn't it?
it is, and also just realizing that thoughts are just thoughts. I mean, again,
Yeah,
such a simple sentence, but I would have otherwise previously given my thoughts a lot more power.
yeah. I
And
always
now
say thoughts aren't facts.
I say
Thoughts are
that
not
too.
facts.
Thoughts are not
Mhm.
facts and thoughts are not predictions. I'm actually really
Right.
terrible at predicting what's gonna happen, really terrible.
Yeah.
So that's been huge, and that has applications way beyond sleep, way
Oh,
beyond.
so much, right? Yeah.
Um, and like I said, I'm probably always gonna be a little bit more anxious, a little bit more thinky. So I think that was a tool that, like I said, I really needed and has helped me a lot. Incidentally, I feel like I almost worry a bit less because again, I don't believe my thoughts as much, And so,
Mhm,
so
mhm.
that's been super helpful. The second is again being less attached to the outcome. Again,
Yeah,
I'm sort of one of those like work, 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 and we're gonna fix it. And like we can control the thing. And with sleep, you learn pretty quickly that you cannot control sleep. And there's actually a lot
that
of
is
things
for
you can
sure.
control. And this one's still like everything, work in progress. It doesn't
Yeah.
come naturally to me. Um, but it's been a really good challenge for me to kind of look at things and go, okay, like how can I be less attached to this? And how can I redirect to what I can control? Right. Like I say
Mhm,
with our sleep, we can't control sleep, but we can control or have more impact on our responses. So
mhm.
even if it's with other people, other relationships, or like a career, like there's always ways that you can kind of be less attached and again just kind of redirect to what is in your control. So again, for the kind of person that I am, that's been really helpful, challenging but helpful.
Yeah,
um
yeah.
and The last one is, the self-kindness piece. And again, wouldn't have even thought of that until Daniel started talking about it. The idea of being kind to myself. Um, Again, a simple concept. And we talk a lot about kindness to other people, but being kind to ourselves was pretty new to me. And I kind of now see it, certainly with our sleep, but again, generally, that it's kind of like the secret sauce. It makes
Mhm,
everything
mhm,
go a little bit smoother, makes it go a little
mhm.
bit faster, and again, has applications way beyond just my sleep. So
Way
trying
beyond.
to be gentler, to myself, has been, it's very freeing. And I think a lot of these three things that I talked about, they make life a bit lighter, and it's just kind of a lighter way to walk through life. And
Yeah.
so I'm grateful for it. And then I
Oh,
think
I love
last,
that.
it's given me purpose. Like any other sleep coach, we've been through it. It's single-handedly the most difficult sustained period of my life. And so to be able to help other people kind of go through it, you know, is a joy, really.
What a
And
gift, right? Yeah, to be able to kind of pay it forward, like turn it around and be able to help others now, right? Having
yeah,
gone through this
yeah,
amazingly difficult thing. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I,
So
I love that, Lori. And so similar. I feel like those concepts, those bigger concepts about being less attached to the outcome and learning to let go of what we don't have control over,
yeah,
that has such big applications with just life in general. And I do think those are like ongoing learnings, right?
yeah,
Because that's something
oh,
we're going to be working towards and working on probably, indefinitely.
yeah,
And that's great, right? It's like we're always progressing, we're
I
evolving.
know. Well,
So,
and I love a good, metaphor and analogy. And I always think of these as like muscles, right? We're building muscles.
yes,
And
yes,
we're not done. I'm not done. I'll never be done,
yeah,
but I'll get
yeah.
better. And and again, before this, I just wanted to sleep, and I sleep. For anyone that's doubting, I do sleep. And so I got that, but I got a whole other slew of
Yeah.
new tools in my toolkit that I didn't even know I needed. But you know I'm grateful for it.
So
So
just to just one more comment based on that exact thing that you said about sleep, because everybody's like, well, are they sleeping now? Kind of want to
Mhm.
know, right? And we always talk about in this space and in our community how sleep is not actually the cure for insomnia, but it's how we react and how we respond to these difficult and uncomfortable sensations, emotions, and thoughts. And has that been true for you? Have you noticed that that change happened first, your reactions and responses, well before, right, sleep started to returned as a byproduct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I
There,
think that's just important to clarify for people
yeah,
because it's not like a means to an end, right? We don't do this work we do this as a new way of being and a new way of experiencing life.
yeah.
And if we do it as a means to an end, like I'm going to do all this work so that I can sleep, it's actually going to
Mhm.
backfire because that's not how this game works. It's not a game, but
Oh,
it's a learning, it's an
yeah,
evolution, and we actually do this for the sake of doing it, not as
yeah.
a means to an end. And I
No,
see people get stuck there. So I think that's a really important
yeah,
clarification. Like,
yeah,
yeah, we're doing this not to get sleep improved, although we all want to sleep well. All humans do. That's a given. That's just
yeah.
a given. But it's how we're reacting and responding that's going to change everything in our life.
Mhm.
Everything.
Well, and
And
even
then
though,
sleep that comes back as a byproduct.
yeah, and even though I sleep well now, like, I can't predict that something might happen, like something, a latent fear bubble might show up in, 5 years. Like, I don't know, or,
Yeah, but
uh,
you know now
and I
that you
know
can
what to
handle it and how to
do.
respond to it.
And that's what
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yep.
you know, I that's the part that I know. I don't
That's what you
know.
take with you.
what will happen in the future. I do know sleep
Yeah.
disruption is absolutely a part of my future. Like I know that.
Right.
I'm
Because we're
human.
human.
We're human,
Yeah.
right? There's noise,
Yeah.
there's stress, there's menopause, there's kids, there's all kinds of things. So I absolutely know that. And I absolutely know what to do if and when, fear does show up. And
Yes.
the knowing is in the knowing how to respond. And I am generally also at peace with not knowing how this is,
That's so
how
big.
this is going to play out. It's just a lot of repetition and a lot of experience has taught me that it's kind of irrelevant what's going to
And
happen.
that's that letting go of control.
Exactly. It's just, I don't need to worry about that because I
That's right.
know that I know what to do, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
which is a whole bunch of nothing, you know, and
Yeah.
so yeah, and that's a really like freeing place to be. So for anyone,
Yeah.
yeah, who has any doubt, the sleep does come, but you kind of have to do your homework first, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, but yeah.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And this is going to really benefit our community so much. Thanks so much for sharing your story and taking the time to be with us today. Is there anything else that you want to say or add on before we conclude our conversation?
No, I mean, I will say, I have a little 5-minute journal and you have to write 3 things you're grateful for every day. And I know for a lot of our students, even when they find sleep coach school, it's hard. It's hard and it's hard
Yeah.
for all of us. And, but I guess I just want to say that, for me, the number of times I have written that I'm grateful for sleep coach school, in the time, because I
Mm,
know for me that, and probably for everyone, like if you don't find it, I know where I'd be if I hadn't found it. So, if it's hard, if you're here and it's still hard, like keep going because
yeah.
it absolutely works. And you'll get to where you want to be, and so yeah, I have a lot of gratitude for finding this because it was a long and winding road to get here, but I'm just so grateful that I finally
Totally
got.
for me too.
Hi, it's me, Coach Daniel, and I hope you found the video you just saw full of inspirational content and full of educational content as well, because that's really what we try to do here in the school. We try to educate and inspire. And if you're finding that things are clicking for you and sleep is happening easier and you're leaving the struggle, please let us know in the comment section, because we live for that. We live for hearing how somebody is finding sleep and life becoming lighter and easier. And not only are you doing us a huge favor as sleep coaches and like filling our tank with that gas that makes us never want to stop doing this, but you're also helping the community. You're helping by inspiring other people, and by commenting, you're telling YouTube that this was interesting, and YouTube feeds our content to more people so that they can discover our teachings and things get easier for them. So again, if you found things getting easier for you, please let us know in the comment section. We can't wait to hear from you.